Hi, and welcome back to the Breakdown with Bethany. I'm Bethany Braun Silva, and today we are going to be talking to Neha Ruch. Neha is the founder of the platform Mother Untitled, and we are going to be talking all things work, ambition, taking breaks, career pivots, and her partnership with Chicco. So you're definitely not going to want to miss this one. Well, let's jump in because
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a little bit of my background because you did mention like entrenched in parenting media. So I jumped into parenting media, mom media when I was 27 years old and a first time mom, and sort of like did both, like just like went with it. So I never really like the idea of sort of like taking a career pause to have kids was never really an option. Like the kids were already in the mix. But I love what you're doing and the message that you send, that you like, you're advocating for mothers working, taking the break. And that really is what Mother Untitled it is from like an outsider perspective. But tell us what inspired you to start this business? And also I'm the title, like the name for it. I would love to get more
Oh,
insight.
ask that because I feel like there's so much depth there that I think at first glance, it's hard to pick up on. So I'll back up. I started it because I'd spent about a decade in advertising, and then I got my MBA from Stanford. There were really high career expectations on what was coming next. And then I had my baby boy, and I think I finally found something I'd been looking for that felt bigger, which was peace. And I said, you know what? Like, I really feel like we have the resources. I have the confidence to be able to downshift my career for a period of time. And that felt right for our family. And I got gobsmacked by just the like overarching stigma and societal pushback about what does it mean for an ambitious woman to say they're going to pause or downshift. And now, granted, this was 2016 when the Lean In movement was still the rallying cry and the girl boss era was still shining. And so I was looking around, and there was a ton of content supporting the traditional concept of the quote unquote working mother. But meanwhile, in my days at home, I was still working 2 days out of the home, and the rest of the time I was at home with my son, meeting these incredible women who were either taking really deliberate, conscious pauses with equitable marriages where they felt like they were carrying an even amount of labor, but they were saying, you know what, I trust myself to go back in 2 years, and or I'm going to figure out some other way to freelance or consult. Or they were tinkering with a new idea, and I said, this does not match up to this caricature of the stay-at-home mother that we've been left with and that society is penalizing us with. And so I initially started Mother Untitled as my own collective of experiences and women to shine a light on this new version of the woman making room for family life, to show it's not black and white. And it has grown into a movement to really redefine that narrative so that women can choose to pause or shift without penalty. And the nature of Untitled is twofold. One is this incredible opportunity when you step away from the gravitas of a work title that brings up a lot of feelings, and yet it can actually unlock a huge amount of exploration and opportunity. And then the other thing, which is really particularly poignant at this moment, is dismantling the really antiquated title of stay-at-home and working mother.
I did have Rajma Sojani on to talk about sort of the current state of working motherhood. And I know she does a lot of advocacy around that. And you mentioned that when you started, it was like the girl boss, right? Where like we're seeing such a pushback for all of that. But I'd love to hear from your perspective. How would you define the current state of a working motherhood? And which is sort of like a redundant thing. I hate to say that every mother is a working woman, but how would you describe it? And then sort of going forward, what changes either on like, a government level or even sort of just like at home, or, what is it now and what would you like to see?
So, one of the things Reshma and I share is this belief that what the pandemic did is it shined a light on the cracks. And it's through the cracks that the light gets in. Like, I do believe that. And I think that it also reminded us that we're all in this together, right? And that we have this shared reality that we're all navigating, and we're all trying to do the best that we can do. And I think that was the gift of the last few years. And for that reason, I do feel cautiously optimistic, because I do think what it did was it compelled sort of a nationwide cultural reckoning around what are our values. what are we really up against, and what do we need to make this all work? And I think it's created a re-examination of work and family that is really going to be ultimately positive. I do think from a policy level, what I wish for is like at a base level is paid family leave, so that women, I will tell you that one of the most heartbreaking messages I get, and I get often, is from women who write me 2 weeks postpartum saying, I don't know what to do if I want to pause my career or go back. And I say to them every single time, take every bit of leave if you have the privilege to have leave. And if you don't make any decisions at this moment. Try and test and learn and reiterate. And that's a whole other podcast, but we almost have to advocate for ourselves and figure out how to create a place where we're not making those kinds of decisions under such duress and physical duress and mental duress. So, that's from like a systemic policy change level, which, unfortunately feels a little out of our control at the moment. But from a personal level and a community level, I feel a lot of optimism. I think women have a shared recognition of what we're all working on. I do believe that we are starting to recognize this like vast gray area, that we are all working in some capacity, that we are all learning and growing if we are at home for a period of time, and that women in the workplace need more support. So I do think that we have a great amount of capacity to better advocate for our needs in the home. So to ask for help and, equitable households and job sharing within the households, that we can have more room to work on other things. I think Eve Rodsky is doing amazing work around that with Fair Play. I think that national discourse has really grown. I think from a community level, we have this incredible ability to sort of share and pass along opportunities to each other. I have an incredible example from within my community of a woman who had just taken on a flexible role as a GM for a great company. And she brought in a woman from our community who had taken a 5-year career break. And because she got it, she understood that woman had still been growing, had still been creating, had been evolving, and could contribute great amounts of impact in the workplace. So that's where I think real change can happen. I do think in the end, it'll be the women.
I love that. I love that. And just to share with you, I started a new job 4 weeks post emergency C-section with my second, and just did not have the resources, the wherewithal to say I need more time to ask. It is heartbreaking. So that is the word that really resonates with me. And that's why I do the sort of work that I do and want to talk to people like you, because I really don't want that to happen to anybody else. So I'm so glad that you said that. I can't really, it really is. But let's talk about Get Your Gig On. I mean, Chicco is obviously one of our favorite, baby product brands, from strollers to feeding and all of that. So, but you're doing something different with them. So tell us about that.
I am. So I have to tell you, when they reached out, I was so struck because for a long time in building Mother Untitled, it's felt like an uphill battle a little bit to say there is a new way parents are engaging with work, and there is an increasing population reimagining what work looks like and finding new ways to blend passions and flexibility into their family life. And for Chicco to be able to say, we're taking ownership of that. Not only are we serving families to create products that make life easier, we're actually studying this population. So you might know that they actually commissioned a fantastic survey that really studied parents and their approach to work and family, and specifically the gig economy. And so what they did by doing that is they really added a level of gravitas and credibility to this conversation around the gray area. So, what Chicco is doing with the Get Your Gig On campaign is shining a light and saying there's an increasing amount of parents who are looking for ways to make income that blend in non-traditional ways. There are people holding on to passion projects alongside family life. And, when they do that, what it does is it begins to shine a light in this larger conversation that there are non-traditional roots and there is a new approach to career. And to your point about what do I hope for in the state of working motherhood, I think that one of the best things we can do is start to shift the dialogue around from career ladder to career portfolios. And things like this Get Your Gig campaign show that we are multi-hyphenated human beings who are working and growing in really interesting, unique ways. And so I was asked to be the face of their campaign and get to have conversations like this on their behalf, blending my insights, building our community with their incredible research and work as well.
Yeah, I think that's really fantastic because, the pandemic was cruel to working mothers. And so now that we're sort of reemerging, it's nice to come back maybe with a certain, rules in hand, right? Like we're going to do it our way. We're going to, but it can be scary, especially if you are, used to that sort of private sector, traditional 9 to 5. So what advice do you have to mothers in particular who, you know, want to take the leap, don't know where to start? What would you say to them?
So first, I think there's a big nothing is final. Like I think we put an incredible amount of pressure on making a choice and saying this is a period. Like we're going to take a pause. It's a period. This is a final. There's something to be said for testing and learning. And I think what the gig economy, as Kiko refers to it, I talk about it as the gray area. You can really test and learn as you go. And especially freelancing, consulting, or building small businesses, the digital tools available for us to do that, whether we're doing it alongside our existing jobs and we sort of want to test how that feels, and or we want to test it alongside family life and see how that feels by investing in sort of a block of care, to give ourselves the bandwidth to be able to do that. There are ways to take these small steps, and I really encourage women, especially the ones who are on pauses or downshifts, to really embrace that your pace doesn't outweigh your purpose. I think for the first few years of building my own project with Mother Untitled, I had young kids, and the reality was that I had to plant seeds for this in the available hours that I did. And I think really going in with clear expectations, because one of the saddest outcomes of the flexible work movement, if it's not done right, is that we get the false memo that now we can do more. We can mother full time and we can work full time. And that does not work. Being able, whether it's a passion project, whether it's a small business, whether it's a freelance economy, everything, if you're investing time into something else, you deserve a little bit of support so that you're able to have predictable windows of time you can invest in that. And for a long time, I'll tell you, in my own life with young kids, I really tried to take nap times just to, I didn't invest in childcare outside of my partner. And I think that was to my detriment, because what it did was it wore me down, so that I, ultimately, even though I thought I'm going to work on this project alongside family life and it's going to fulfill me and make me whole, that only works if you're doing that in a very healthy way. And I think too often I see in my community of women who sort of downshift their paid work and their salary is they equate, okay, I'm not doing as much paid work, so I don't deserve as much paid help. And obviously, affordable childcare is yet another issue that we have to tackle in this country. But we do have, and we have this on our site as well, lots of options for creative childcare solutions and ways to lean on our partner as a first chance if we are in a two-parent household, to get the help we need and that we deserve to invest in ourselves, including investing in passion projects and small businesses.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. I actually went through something like that last week where instead of I had, normally it's an extremely busy day. I had a moderately busy day. So I thought, oh, I should just keep my kids home from camp.
Yes, we've all done that.
Why do we do that? Like what
No.
like and I actually ended up sending them because I've been in Liz Mom media and talked to enough mothers to realize that that would have been a mistake, and that I would have been able to spend the time being present with my kid. There would have been plenty of hours in the day when they were returned home from camp where I would really appreciate that time rather than trying to manage both, right? My moderately busy work schedule and keeping them entertained, active, and me engaged with them. I don't know why we do that. It's wild. I'm sure someone smarter than me has an answer.
Well, what's interesting about that is unlike men, so men, I have noticed this, that men, when they have an ounce of flexibility, they feel unashamed. And by the way, this is not a knock on them. It's a good that we should borrow it from them, of using that flexibility to make themselves whole and healthy. When we have an ounce of flexibility, we say, okay, that flexibility needs to go immediately to our family. And I think, as we approach and navigate this new flexible work economy, we do need to redraft the rules and the societal expectations and our expectations of ourselves. But one of those expectations is we do actually deserve margin just for ourselves.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering because we were talking a little bit, my kids are 7 and 11, and of course they still need me. I still want to, I sort of like a sweet spot where they're old enough to do things on their own, but I still want to hang out with me. And it obviously the dynamic has shifted from when they were babies and toddlers. So I am able to give a lot to, my personal passion projects and work. So can you talk to me a little bit about how that's shifted with you now that your kids are 5 and 7? What does, maybe like a work day look like? And how are you, I hate again to say balancing it, but
I get it. Blending. I mean, it's all the same means to the end. We're all saying the same thing. So I will tell you, I'm glad you asked that question. When I first started, the motherhood journey, I initially downshifted. And I think, like I was talking about in terms of testing and learning, I wanted to see how the freelance life worked for me. And it worked, but it didn't give me enough meaning and enough income to offset the cost of childcare for those 2 days and and make me feel gratified stepping away from my kid. And that was my own, but it took me a year to figure that out. At which point I decided to commit the full 5 days at home and really invest in the passion project alongside. And a lot of that work was done during that time at nap time, and all of this worked. I had a babysitter for like a half day, it all made sense. And then I had a second kid. And the reality of having a second kid is that's like a grenade into any version of balance or blend or whatever you want to call it. Like it just upends again. And I think that's so important for women and men in the gray area to recognize, is that yes, it can sound like the gray area is this like an amazing concept of having it all, but it's not, because you're constantly recalibrating what has to give and how much you're able to give those different buckets. And so when I had my second child, it all came upended, and I really had to sort of just keep the lights on. And I'm so glad I did, and plant the seeds for Mother Untitled in the fringe hours of the day, because 2 kids really did take a lot out of me emotionally, and a lot of my time was going that way. And then when my kids, post pandemic, both were school aged, I had suddenly these blocks of time again, right? And I did bring on childcare. So I had, during the school year, a babysitter 2 afternoons a week so that I could get 2 full days of work time. And the remainder of the time I was with the kids, blocking and tackling between them. And what it was able to do was really block schedule time to focus on the business. And then in 2022, when I signed a book deal, so I have a forthcoming book called The Power Pause, I recalibrated again on what my care situation would look like. And now I'm investing even more time into the work versus family equation. And I think it's not necessarily versus, but I think I've come to trust that I can shift in the seasons and recalibrate often. And I also recognize that summer is a different beast than back to school, right? Like summer is in a way magical for me because my kids are at summer camp. I know for some women, it's the complete opposite. And then back to school, I've like basically blocked off September to go into a hole and like deal with what it will look like to transition them back. And I think giving ourselves the flexibility, not to overplay that word, but to know that we are constantly going to be shifting what we can give our work selves, our life selves, our relationships, and our children, and know that we have the ability to recalibrate often is a gift, because that way it feels like you're not making this one forever decision and neglecting one thing.
Yeah, I think what I'm going to take from that for my own, personal use is really just a little bit of forethought. Like you said, like I haven't even started to think about September because I can barely get through the next 2 weeks of July. But I think with, some careful planning, it will help me kind of, like help my kids transition to back to school without feeling like pulled in a million directions if I'm blocked off for work. So I love that. Thank you for that very practical tip. I will be using it. We're going to wrap things up really soon, but I'm wondering, because we did talk about sort of like this motherhood collective and how, we're really advocates for ourselves, advocates for others. Who are some moms out there that you sort of look to for inspiration, guidance, and maybe some laughs? Or they can be on social media, wherever.
I love that. So I'm glad you mentioned Reshma, because I do think her work in building a movement is work that I admire. I think that, we're both building movements alongside one another. And I think it's important to recognize that we're actually, even though she has like traditionally focused on, or, been bundled in the quote unquote working mother camp, we're actually all working towards the same ends. And I think that that's a really interesting takeaway of the last couple of years. Eve Rodsky I think her work is just fabulous. We share an editor now for my book and hers. And so I feel lucky to be connected to her in that way. But I think fair play is really changing the game for women and partners in the home by giving them language and tools to share responsibilities. Chamber of Mothers, I think from an advocacy perspective, gives women the tools to figure out like, how can we be activists? And by the way, I should say that for a lot of people, Get Your Gig On doesn't have to be a small business. It doesn't have to be a passion project. It can be activism and volunteerism. I think a huge percentage of our community stays connected to their identity and to their communities through volunteerism and activism. So I just think that they're a fantastic resource in rallying women around.
That's incredible. All right, Neha, this has been so fantastic. Tell us what's next for Mother Untitled, or sort of anything coming, coming up in the next few months or year. And then of course, where can we find you? And, what would you call it? What is it? An organization, a movement? Tell us where we can find you on social media, stuff like that.
So we are releasing something big in September, so stay tuned. But in the meantime, you can come visit. We're going to have a new beautiful site that speaks to this next phase of Mother Untitled, launching on August 1st. But you can come visit us anytime, sign up for the newsletter, follow us on Instagram. We have a community of 100,000 moms there who are all in this incredible cohort of ambitious women in various stages of the gray area. So it's a great place to get inspiration and reframes, and just remember that we're all making the right choice for right now. And obviously we have the forthcoming book, so please pre-order when that becomes available in the spring.
Amazing. Oh, I will pre-order. So thank you so much.
Thank you.